Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something huge, moving abroad. Maybe for study, maybe for work.
Huh.
It's exciting, right? New cultures, new opportunities.
Absolutely. An incredible adventure.
But beneath that excitement, there's often this, mountain of financial admin. It's surprisingly complex.
It really is. We're talking cross-border finances, visas, banking in different currencies, finding somewhere to live.
Yeah, exactly. Getting hit with unexpected relocation costs, trying to understand visa rules that feel, I don't know, incredibly frick.
More like an audit sometimes.
Right. And if you don't get a handle on this financial maze, honestly, the whole dream can kind of stall before you even pack your bags.
It's a major hurdle.
So that's our mission today. We want to give you a roadmap. Think of this deep dive as your shortcut to figuring out these unique money challenges. We'll cover it all from building that initial, often massive budget to finding clever ways to save on things like housing and avoiding tax nightmares.
And we've got some great sources lined up. We've looked at practical guides for budgeting that first year abroad, some really stark warnings about common pitfalls, especially for expats in places like Asia.
Okay.
Plus, global cost of living data. And this is key. We're diving into the total relocation cost. It can easily be 3, 4, even 6 times what people initially guess.
So that detailed budget isn't just a nice to have.
It's non-negotiable. And critically, you have to build in a decent contingency fund, for the unexpected.
Okay, but that budget's only useful if the numbers are realistic for where you're going, right? The cost of living varies so much.
Massively. And that's where we need to talk about cost of living, or CO, versus purchasing power. They're related, but different.
Explain that. How does that work?
Okay, so the cost of living index, you often see it benchmarked against a city like New York, or maybe the U.S. averages 100, tells you roughly how expensive things are on average. Rent, groceries, transport.
Right. Higher number, more expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the purchasing power index, also often benchmarked to US 100, tells you how much your income can actually buy in that location relative to the local prices.
So a place could be expensive, but if wages are also really high.
Precisely. That's the key insight. Take somewhere like Norway. The CO index is high, things cost a lot, but its purchasing power index is also really strong. Why? Because average wages are high enough to more than offset those high prices. The average person can afford a lot.
Okay, that makes sense. And the reverse can be true too. Moderate cost of living, but maybe lower wages means less purchasing power?
It can be. Or look at Singapore, moderate CARL, according to some indices, but surprisingly high purchasing power. It's complex.
So you really need to research both before you go.
You absolutely do. Use tools like Numbeo, Expatistan. They help break down costs for essentials like housing, food, healthcare, transport in specific cities. Don't just guess.
And digging into those startup costs you mentioned, the housing deposit is a big one. First, last, and security.
It's standard in many places, and it catches so many people out. And then there's furnishing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, some countries, Germany's a classic example.
Yeah.
Unfurnished often means completely bare. Like you might need to buy light fixtures, curtains, maybe even a kitchen sink or stove.
Seriously, wow. Okay, that's another huge potential cost.
It adds up fast. Plus, don't forget the paperwork costs. Visa fees themselves, sure, but also potentially getting documents translated, notarized, maybe getting an apostille.
What's an apostille again?
It's like a special government stamp that certifies your document. Say, a birth certificate or degree is legitimate for use in another country that's part of the Hague Convention. More fees, more admin.
Okay, this is already sounding expensive. So, once you've somehow budgeted for all that, what about the safety net, the emergency fund? Back home, people save 6 months of expenses. Is that enough when you're abroad?
Almost certainly not. The sources are really clear on this.
Why not?
Because expat life just has more uncertainty baked in. Think about it. Losing your job is tougher when your visa might depend on it. A family emergency back home means an expensive last-minute flight.
Medical issues.
Medical issues could require evacuation, which standard insurance might not cover. The potential for big, unexpected costs is just higher.
So what's the recommendation?
Most experts strongly advise aiming for 9 to 12 months of living expenses in your international emergency fund.
9 to 12 months. Wow, that's a much bigger savings goal for most people.
It is, but it reflects the increased risk and distance from your usual support network.
Okay. So let's say someone manages that. They've got the startup cash. They've got the big emergency fund. They land. What happens next? Where do they trip up managing money day to day across borders?
Well, the number one most common and often most costly mistake is just using their bank account from back home for everything.
Just swiping their usual debit or credit card.
Yeah, for daily coffees, groceries, paying rent.
Hmm.
You get absolutely killed by international transaction fees, foreign ATM withdrawal fees, and, crucially, really poor exchange rates from your bank.
Death by 1,000 cuts, basically.
Exactly. It adds up incredibly fast.
So what's the fix? What should you do immediately?
Get a local bank account opened as soon as humanly possible after you arrive and have the necessary documents. That's your priority.
Okay.
But depending on your situation, maybe you're moving around a bit or you still have financial ties back home, you should also look seriously at multi-currency accounts.
You mean from fintech companies like Wise, Revolut, that kind of thing?
Precisely. They let you hold money in multiple currencies, spend directly using a linked card, often with much lower fees, and transfer money internationally at rates that usually beat traditional banks significantly.
That seems vital, especially if you're earning in one currency and paying rent in another. That fluctuation risk?
It's huge. People underestimate currency risk. If you earn in dollars but pay your mortgage or rent in euros, even a small shift in the exchange rate over the year can cost you thousands. You didn't spend more, the currency just moved against you.
So you need to be actively managing that.
You really do. Stay informed about exchange rate trends. Maybe use rate alerts. Plan larger transfers strategically, perhaps using specialist currency brokers for big amounts, not just your bank's default option. Treat it like managing an investment.
Okay, so banking and currency sorted, but then come the really big headaches, the legal stuff, compliance, tax, insurance.
Yeah, these are the areas where mistakes can be really serious, not just expensive.
Let's start with tax. That sounds terrifying.
It can be. The main issue is misunderstanding your obligations. Where do you owe tax? Just in your new country. Or back home, too.
Like for Americans, right? They have to file based on worldwide income.
Exactly. The U.S. taxes its citizens wherever they live. Many other countries tax based on residency. If you don't understand the rules and any tax treaties between your home and host country, you could easily end up paying tax twice on the same income, or facing penalties for failing to file correctly.
So what's the takeaway?
Honestly, for tax, you almost certainly need professional help. Find an accountant who specializes in expat tax for your specific home and host countries. Don't try to wing it.
Okay, good advice. What about insurance? People assume their policy from home covers them.
That's a dangerous assumption. Your standard domestic health insurance, probably useless internationally, or has very limited emergency-only cover. Life insurance policies might also have restrictions based on residency.
So you could find yourself facing huge medical bills, or worse.
Absolutely. You must review your policies before you move. You'll likely need specific expat health insurance, potentially including medical evacuation cover, and check your life insurance terms. Update them if needed.
And the third piece of that compliance puzzle, estate planning.
Yeah, another one people forget. Wills, trusts, powers of attorney.
Yeah.
The laws governing these vary dramatically between countries. Your will drafted back home might not be legally recognized or fully executable in your new country of residence.
Creating a legal nightmare for your loved ones if something happens.
Exactly. Again, you need legal advice from someone familiar with the laws in both jurisdictions.
Okay, so planning, banking, legal. It's a lot. Let's make this more concrete. You mentioned using the UK's financial requirements for visas as a kind of real-world test case?
Right. Not because everyone's moving to the UK, but because their appendix finance rules are incredibly detailed and show the kind of hoops you might have to jump through anywhere. They illustrate the rigor of the process.
So what are they actually checking? What do they want to see?
Broadly, for many visa routes like Ancestry visas, some student routes, those coming from Hong Kong via the BNO route, they look at two main things.
Okay.
One, do you have enough specific funds for the specific purpose? So for a student, that's course fees plus a set amount for monthly living costs, known as maintenance.
All right, that makes sense. What's the second thing?
Two, can you and any dependents coming with you adequately maintain and accommodate yourselves without needing access to public funds? Basically, can you support yourself without relying on welfare benefits?
And they don't just take your word for it. They want hard proof.
Oh, absolutely. And the proof requirements are intense. The most famous one is the 28-day rule.
Ah, yes. Tell us about that.
The required funds, whether it's for maintenance or just general savings, usually have to have been held in your bank account for a continuous period of 28 days. Yes. And that 28-day period is counted backwards from the date of the closing balance on your most recent bank statement submitted with the application. If the balance dips below the required amount at any point during those 28 days, it doesn't count. If you get a big gift or transfer money in on day 27, doesn't count towards that specific requirement.
Wow, that is incredibly strict. No last-minute cash injections allowed.
Pretty much. They want to see stable funds.
Yeah.
And they're very specific about what kind of funds are acceptable.
It's like what's not allowed.
Things like overdrafts, obviously. But also certain types of investments or funds that aren't immediately accessible, think some pension funds or shares, unless they're liquidated. Promises of financial support from third parties generally aren't allowed either, unless the specific visa route explicitly permits it, like for some family or sponsored routes.
Okay, and what if your money isn't in UK pounds? How do they handle currency conversion?
Usually they convert it using the spot exchange rate on the date of the application, typically using a recognized source like oanda.com.
Simple enough.
But there's a fascinating little quirk. For certain currencies where there's a massive difference between the official government exchange rate and the actual free market rate thing places with very high inflation or strict currency controls, they specifically mention Iranian rials, Syrian pounds.
Right.
In those cases, they don't use OANDA. They switch to using the UK Foreign Office's own consular exchange rate, the CER.
Why?
Presumably to avoid applicants benefiting from unrealistic official rates and to get a more stable assessment. It's a very bureaucratic solution to a real-world currency problem.
That's incredibly specific. Okay, and then there's that adequate maintenance calculation you mentioned. It's not just having savings, it's about income versus outgoings.
Exactly. For certain routes, particularly settlement or family visas, where long-term reliance on public funds is a concern, they use a specific formula. You often see it written as A minus B must be greater than or equal to C.
Okay, break that down. A, B, and C.
A is your net income or available funds, what you actually have access to each week or month after tax and national insurance.
Got it.
B represents your housing costs. There's usually your weekly rent or mortgage payments, plus things like council tax in the UK.
Okay, so income minus housing costs.
Must be greater than or equal to C. And C is the crucial part. It's the amount the UK government considers the minimum income required to meet essential needs without public funds, based on the equivalent income support level for a family of your size.
So it's like a poverty line benchmark?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
For example, for a single adult aged 25 or over, that benchmark figure C's might be around 75 times per week currently, though these figures change. So after you pay your rent and council tax, you need to prove you still have at least that 75 times per week left over from your income or accessible funds.
So it's not enough just to have money in the bank. You have to show your ongoing finances after essential housing costs keep you above that basic support level.
Precisely. It forces a really practical assessment of whether you can actually afford to live there without immediately needing state help. It's a high bar.
It really shows the level of detail involved. Okay, let's pivot now. Assuming someone navigates all that, gets the visa, lands. Let's talk practical daily money saving. What are the hacks for budgeting and housing, especially for someone maybe on a tighter budget like a student?
Right, back to the day-to-day. For budgeting structure, a lot of sources mention the 50-30-20 rule as a good starting point.
Okay, remind us what that is.
50% of your income goes towards essentials. That's rent, utilities, food, necessary transport. 30% is for discretionary spending, eating out, hobbies, travel, fun stuff. And 20% goes towards savings or paying down debt.
Seems reasonable.
It is, but the big caveat abroad is that housing, the 50% part, can often eat up way more than half your income, especially in popular cities. If that happens, you have to make cuts elsewhere, usually in that 70% discretionary bucket.
Makes sense. And for people really trying to be frugal, students maybe, or just anyone wanting to save hard, where are the easy wins?
Well, the biggest impact often comes from location choice itself. Choosing a country or city with a fundamentally lower cost of living makes everything easier. Think parts of Southeast Asia, Central or South America, Eastern Europe compared to, say, London or Zurich.
Okay, location first. Then what?
Accommodation is usually the next biggest lever. Sharing housing, getting roommates can easily cut your rent and utility costs by 30, 40, even 50% or more compared to living alone.
A classic student move, but effective.
Very effective. And the other big one is food. Cooking the vast majority of your meals at home instead of eating out or getting takeaways, even cheap ones, saves a ton of money over time. Hundreds a month, potentially. And use public transport or walk cycle instead of taxis or owning a car. Basic stuff, but it adds up.
Right. Now, about finding that accommodation, people often just go to the big international rental websites, maybe Airbnb for longer stays, but you often pay a premium there, don't you?
You definitely can. Those platforms are convenient, but they often cater to tourists or short-term stays, and the prices reflect that. Plus, platform fees.
So, what are the smarter alternatives the sources suggest for finding longer term, better value places?
It depends a bit on what you're looking for. If you need something reliable, maybe furnished, perhaps for business travel or remote work, you might look at sites specializing in executive rentals or serviced apartments. Companies like Corporate Stays or higher-end curated sites like Plum Guide, though Plum Guide can be pricey, comparable to hotels.
Okay, that's for the corporate end. What about finding more local, potentially cheaper deals?
That's where you need to go local. Use Google Maps to find local real estate agents. Immobilien in German. Inmobiliarias in Spanish. In the specific neighborhoods you like. Check local classified websites like Viva Anuncios in Mexico, Gumtree in the UK or Australia, Craigslist in the US, or expat-focused rental sites like Just Landed can sometimes have good listings.
So, doing more legwork locally.
Exactly. And for flexibility, or if you're really trying to save, there are other options.
Like what?
Subletting platforms like sublet.com can offer deals. Co-living spaces are increasingly popular. Companies like Kowali or Kindred offer rooms in shared houses, often with built-in community.
Interesting.
Or you could look at house-sitting or pet-sitting platforms like Trusted House Sitters. You get free accommodation in exchange for looking after someone's home and pets while they're away. It requires flexibility, but the savings are huge.
Wow, okay. Free accommodation.
Or even renting a camper van or RV through something like Indie Campers for a totally mobile option, though that has its own costs.
Lots of alternatives. But what about the really old school method?
You mean hitting the pavement?
Yeah. Just showing up and looking around, does that still work?
Absolutely. It's often the best way to find hidden gems and true local prices. The strategy is book a cheap, short-term rental for your first week or two. Then physically walk around the neighborhoods you're interested in. Look for rent signs, alors in French, say alquile in Spanish, zu vermieten in German.
And call the number on the sign.
Exactly. You're often dealing directly with the landlord, bypassing agents and platforms entirely. You get the real local rate, no markups. It takes effort, but it can save you a fortune, especially on that initial deposit and monthly rent.
That's a fantastic practical tip. Okay, this has been a really thorough deep dive. If we had to boil it down, what are the absolute essentials for someone listening who's planning that move?
I think it comes down to two things, really. First, the upfront preparation. You need that detailed budget for the huge initial costs, and you need that much larger emergency fund, the 9-12 months worth. No shortcuts there.
Right. Preparation is key.
And second, you need to proactively tackle the complexities. Understand the banking and currency situation before you go. Get professional advice on tax and legal compliance. Don't guess. And be aware of how rigorous those official financial checks, like the visa rules, can actually be.
So massive planning and tackling the scary stuff head on.
Pretty much. And ultimately, I think mastering expat finance is about building financial flexibility. Things change, exchange rates move, tax laws get updated, your personal situation might shift. Your financial setup needs to be agile enough to handle that.
And seeking that professional advice isn't admitting defeat. It's actually a smart investment.
Absolutely. Especially for longer-term things like optimizing investments across borders, retirement planning, or complex tax situations. A good expat financial advisor can save you far more than they cost in the long run.
Makes total sense. Okay, before we wrap up, let's leave our listener with something to think about. A final provocative thought based on all this.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the cost of living, comparing prices using indices, but what about the value? If that basket of goods used to calculate the index in one country contains, say, food produced with fewer regulations or lower quality standards than what you're used to back home,
Good point.
how do you actually quantify the true value you're getting for the money you spend overseas rather than just the numerical cost? It's not always an apples-to-apples comparison, is it?
That's a really interesting question. Quality versus quantity, value versus price.
Yeah.
Definitely something to ponder beyond just the spreadsheets.
Exactly. Food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Catch you next time.